generation of apartments in New York got even smaller. That's not just a possibility. It's already happened in one Manhattan neighborhood. You're looking at Carmel Place, the first micro-apartment complex in New York City, which opened in June and only rents units that are smaller than 400 square feet. The New York Times recently spent a night inside one of these apartments to get a sense of what it's like. And here's a look at what they found.
When the tiny house movement comes to New York City, you get this, the micro-apartment. Full living quarters in a modest 300 square feet. That's me, Penelope. I'm a reporter for the Times, and I'm about 5 foot 8 inches tall. This micro-apartment is located in the Carmel Place development in Manhattan, where 32 market-rate studios rent for about $2,400 to $3,200 a month. If you think you can make the leap, that is, downsize to 300 square feet, consider this. You'd be occupying a space that's about 1/100th the size of Grand Central Terminal's main concourse, and about the size of this bathroom in the Elizabeth Taylor Suite at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. At its widest, it measures about half the width of your typical New York commuting platform, and at its longest, about 1/3 of the length of this Metro North car. It's just smaller than the inside of the Metropolitan Museum's Temple of Dendur, which, by the way, has 3 rooms. But then again, we New Yorkers have evolved to appreciate small spaces. We dine in them regularly. I can walk from one end of this apartment to the other in 6 seconds. But the space, designed by the architecture firm N Architects, is surprisingly functional, with lots of closets and nooks to hide any mess. The kitchen is outfitted with a refrigerator, electric stovetops, a microwave, and even a dishwasher. Most of the furniture is multi-purpose and made to conveniently stow away when not in use. Take this desk. In a couple of minutes, it'll transform into a fully extended dining table. While the bathroom has a shower stall instead of a bathtub, it manages to feel, well, at least by our studio apartment standards, almost castle-sized. But there are compromises. Like the Murphy bed, if not raised into the wall, you'd find it taking up most of your living space altogether. Putting it out of the way every day would get you your daily upper body workout. So it's a space purpose-built for one. But what if you're the type who likes to entertain?
Welcome to my small apartment.
Well, first of all, if you're like many New Yorkers, you'd probably skip cooking and order in. Having 6 at the dinner table is pushing it, but not if you're close friends. It'll be cozy, and seating arrangements are tricky. And so is stepping over each other to use the facilities. You've probably seen wide-angle shots like this, used in apartment advertisements to make things look roomier than they are in real life. So to put this shot into perspective, that's our video producer in the foreground. And she's standing just about here, close to the farthest end of the apartment, opposite where we're hanging out. New York City waived regulations requiring that apartments be at least 400 square feet so that the Carmel Place development could be built. Still, it's yet to be seen whether or not this style of living will catch on. The apartments are about half the size of an average studio in Manhattan and cost considerably more in rent per square foot. But it's a new, modern, and legal nook, all of your own, without roommates and perhaps with all the space one person might need as a haven from the city. This is Penelope Green for the New York Times.
And joining me now with more on micro-apartments and the impact they could have on the city is Vivian Toy, the editor of the New York Times real estate section. Vivian, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Vivian, you were at that dinner party we just saw there. What was that experience like? It looked cozy indeed.
It was definitely cozy when we were all seated around the table. But I'll tell you, when we first walked in, it didn't feel so tight because the table wasn't completely up yet. And the ceiling height makes a huge difference.
Right, it's 9.5, right?
Yeah, and then there's the floor-to-ceiling windows, and that just lends an openness, and that's sort of specific to the design of it. They know when you're in a tight space, if you get a lot of light in and you have high ceilings, you're not going to feel as enclosed as you might otherwise.
Now, it was made clear, except for the 14 units specifically set aside for below market rate rentals and 8 that were set aside for formerly homeless veterans. These other apartments are far from cheap.
No,
in fact, you
not.
could pay $35,000 a year for one of them.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, most micro or near micro apartments, at least in Manhattan, I'm willing to wage, are far from cheap nowadays. So what's the attraction of these micro or near micro apartments?
Well, I mean, I think this building was built when Mayor Bloomberg was still in office, and he opened up a competition just to sort of get the conversation going to see, is it possible to build more of these as opposed to having, 5 23-year-old girls living in a 2-bedroom apartment on top of each other, And but the bottom line is land prices are so high in Manhattan, you can't really build anything and not charge those kinds of prices. And at the same time, the appeal of living in this small space is the communal space outside. And that building has it. It's got, it's got a roof deck, it's got a gym, and so it's all about providing enough sort of outlet outside of the apartment so that you don't feel claustrophobic. And if you add all those extras in, you can't build them.
But how are the changing demographics of the city creating a market for these?
Well, the percentage of single people is going up, particularly as people postpone getting married, and with the aging population. A lot of the older people are...
Or who are by themselves?
Are by themselves. But again, they're not going to be able to afford $3,000 a month to live in that kind of space either. Or nor would they necessarily want to move out of where they are. I mean, that's a whole different situation.
This the land on which this complex was built was donated by the city. And as we've been saying, these are luxury micros, not affordable micros. Right. Why did the city do that?
Again, I think it was to just get the conversation started so that then they could think about, is there a way that we can build this somewhere else where the land prices might not be as high, and could we make it viable? And at this point, I don't think the de Blasio administration has moved that far along in that, because they're dealing with affordable housing issues in other ways.
So as I think we heard briefly, there was a law that limited... And it was passed in 1987. I missed it. That limited the construction of apartments to no less than 400 square feet. What was that? Why was that?
Well, that was because, over time, you have to go back in history. If you go, for example, if you visit the Tenement Museum, those apartments, they're all 350 square feet, and they're 3 rooms. There's a living room, a bedroom, and a kitchen. And people in the early, 20th century lived like a family of 5, and then they would rent out the kitchen to a boarder. I mean, you'd have like 10 people in this tiny space. And
so the idea was to avoid that kind of a neo-tenement era.
Right. They wanted to avoid that. But in the interim, there were a lot of buildings that built apartments that small.
I lived in an efficiency that I think must have been 400 feet. So in like 30 seconds we have left, how is this going to change the real estate market of the city? What do you predict? Let's say 5 years from now, what's it going to look like?
For the time being, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on it. It's more theoretical at this point.
Okay. All right, Vivian, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.